is Lisa from Mobiletechreview, and this is the new iPad Pro 10.5, and this is the second generation iPad Pro 12.9. Just imagine it here. It's too hard to hold them both at once, honestly. That's a big slab of glass there, but we're going to have them both on screen on the desk now because we're going to look at them now. So meet the new high-end iPads for 2017 now, as always, well, really available in small and large sizes, not so small, and the 12.9-inch. The 9.7-inch iPad Pro has been replaced by the 10.5-inch, but the size of the device is only ever so slightly bigger. You wouldn't even notice it, but you get more screen real estate. How did they do that? Smaller bezels on the sides, particularly on the sides here. The caveats, be careful what you wish for. When you have less bezel, as a tablet, you're always grabbing and holding it, you might accidentally touch something once in a while and do something you didn't mean to do. That said, I've only had that happen in the App Store so far, so it hasn't been that bad. Anyway, $650 starting price. This is not a cheap tablet, folks, but then there's the regular iPad, much more affordable model for people who don't want or can't afford the Pro features. I think everybody wants Pro features, don't they, or nicer stuff. Quad speakers on this one, just like quad speakers on this one right here, both running on Apple's A10X CPU. It's significantly faster. Apple was actually a little bashful there when they were talking about, well, speed improvements, 30%, 40%. These are extremely fast. These actually beat the pants off of the very few competing high-end Android tablets on the market, like the Samsung Galaxy Tab S3. They're about twice as fast. Same CPU, same clock speed, and both these same 4 gigs of RAM. Good times, because the old iPad Pro 9.7-inch one only had 2 gigs of RAM, and that could be a problem, especially for those of you who bought it for art. Using something like Procreate, it limits the number of layers that you can actually use, especially for higher resolution images. So now they're on parity, and now, even though I'd like to see 6 gigs on the bigger one, I haven't found a way to actually max out RAM. Even doing multitasking, drawing fairly high resolution pictures with many layers, I do like up to 30 layers sometimes, which is a lot. No problem. I haven't run out of memory yet on these. The 12.9-inch starts at $799 as always. No price change there, but the storage increments have improved. So the base model has 64 gigabytes of storage. Next one up is 256, and then the biggest capacity is 512 gigs. Same capacities are true for the 10.5-inch model. So that's something that Apple typically does. Honestly, they very rarely drop the prices on these, but they improve the amount of storage that you get inside with each generation. Of course, there's LTE models available, the cellular unlocked ones that work with pretty much all carriers, and that's going to cost you some additional money as well. And that's using LTE Advanced at this point, and you get GPS, as always, if you get the LTE model, not the Wi-Fi only model. The 10.5-inch weighs 1.03 pounds, which is 470 grams. The 12.9-inch is 1.49 pounds, so I got just a little bit lighter, and 677 grams there. So one of the thinnest and lightest tablets certainly on the market. You could say, well, it helps that it runs a mobile OS, but given the fact that this has an Ultrabook-sized battery in here and a CPU that benchmarks faster than some Core i5s on Geekbench 4, we'll get to that discussion in a minute. Well, impressive. That leads to iOS 11 coming in the fall. Now, I don't know why some people are saying, oh, you just can't review these really until iOS 11 comes out because it's such a game changer. And it does, particularly improve multitasking. You get the dock-style launcher like you have under Mac OS, drag and drop, those nice things. But I think that's just bulldinky to say you can't review them now because there's still fine tablets with OS 10. And, you know, a lot of people actually buy tablets to use them as tablets primarily and not always as laptop stand-ins. No matter how hard Apple tries to push the idea of these being laptop replacements or people justify the price by saying, well, it can do what my laptop does, they do all the same stuff now. They play videos. You can use Microsoft Word on here. You can use iMovie and edit 4K video, all that stuff right now. A little interface tweaking to make that more computer-like experience better, sure. And yes, you'll get, finally, an iOS native file manager. That said, I've been using third-party file managers for quite some time. Gets the job done, too. That said, can you use these as laptop replacements? If your needs are light, yes, and if you don't need, obviously, desktop programs. There's no Photoshop, real Photoshop, yet for iOS. Now, there's a new program called Affinity from the folks at Serif that really is pushing the envelope there and getting pretty close to Photoshop. We have Microsoft Word running here, which has many, not all of the features still of the desktop program, but I think it's enough for most people. Obviously, you've got iMovie, you've got GarageBand, and those are some of the value addeds that you get with iPads. It has a nice core set of programs that you can make a lot of use of on this. Honestly, I've tried to use this as a laptop replacement, the first generation one with the smart keyboard, which was not my favorite keyboard, though it got the job done. And I did write reviews on it. I could do WordPress on it, no problem. The basics are certainly there. Yeah, for photo editing, now yes, maybe, but not before. Most of you don't have to do really high-end looking photos for your website, so do you? So for your everyday fun photo editing and video editing, yeah, it does do the job. Again, that's a whole different conversation there, whether these are completely laptop replacements. And with the new Surface Pro coming out, there will be a smackdown, so we can talk about that some more. Now for the 10.5-inch, Apple has a new smart keyboard because, well, it's a slightly bigger product, and it affords just enough room to actually make that keyboard feel a lot more usable. It's funny how, you're talking about less than an inch can really make that much of a difference in usability, but it does. Now, the displays on these, Apple continues to lead on the mobile display front. Samsung certainly does a fantastic job with their OLED displays, or AMOLED as they call it, displays on their phones, but even the Samsung Galaxy Tab S3 has a very nice OLED display, but these are just a little more natural looking. I like OLED, but it can look a little Disney. These are wide gamut P3 displays, and that's something we saw first in the iPad Pro 9.7. Now it's standard for both models. I owned a 12.9, and I always just wished I could have had that high gamut display, but I wasn't ready to go down to a smaller size just to get it. Now you don't have to make that concession anymore. They've added something else called ProMotion, because we must have a marketing name for everything, right? What that means is a 120 hertz refresh display. Those of you who are into gaming laptops and gaming monitors know that fast refresh displays are great for less ghosting when you're playing games. The old displays were a 60 hertz refresh rate, which is pretty much the industry standard for laptop displays and mobile OS products displays too. So what does that mean here? Well, if you're watching really fast-moving content, you might see less ghosting. More noticeable is when you're doing something like moving around the operating system, the animations, the look of scrolling, just scrolling across the icons, and then even in something like Zinio, which has some pretty lush pages, it really looks like you're shifting a piece of paper. It makes more of a difference than I would have thought on a mobile product. The variable refresh rate here also lets it drop as low as 24 hertz. So if you're watching a 24p cinematic movie, it can sync up with that refresh rate. It also means that it can drop down to lower refresh rates when fast refresh isn't needed, and that's going to save on battery life. Lastly, but for somebody like me who's an artist, and for you note takers too, that also means that the pencil is going to feel more responsive. The Apple Pencil is still a $99 separate purchase, but that pencil now feels even more like, well, pen on paper or pencil on paper. It's pretty uncanny how you draw the line and it just seems to appear in real time. There's a 20 millisecond latency there, a refresh. That's very low. That's up there with the best of the newest Wacom EMR technologies. It's also 1 millisecond better than the new Surface Pro, as if 1 millisecond mattered, really. What it means is when you're drawing, you do notice it. I noticed it. I spend several nights a week drawing in Procreate on the iPad, and I could tell the difference. It's nice. It's not like, oh, it would be horrible if you had to stick with the first generation, but it's certainly a sweet upgrade for anybody who is upgrading or getting an iPad Pro for the first time to write notes and to draw as well. By the way, with prediction, stroke prediction, for example, it can be as good as 8 milliseconds effective in terms of response time. So if you draw or write predictably, which I suspect many of us actually do, then it can seem even faster than it is. As with the last generation, one thing I noticed though is the initial force of activation, that is how hard you have to press before a mark is made on the screen, is a bit higher on the smaller iPad. And that was one of the things as an artist that pushed me towards the bigger iPad, because I really like, light drawing means getting a mark on the screen there. You can adjust the pressure curves in some programs like Procreate to compensate for that, but that's just an odd thing. I don't know why it is. Same thing with the iPad Pro 9.7 too. It required a bit of a harder touch. Keep in mind that the iPad Pro Pencil is monogamous. That means you stick it most awkwardly into the butt of the iPad to pair it up. You can also charge it this way too. Now you can practice serial monogamy, but every time you want to switch to a different iPad, say you have 2 iPad Pros in the family and 2 people want to use one pencil, you just have to stick it in the butt of the other iPad, hit the pair button on the screen. Both of these have wide P3 gamut displays, 600 nits of brightness, and that means they can do HDR. However, there's not much in the way of HDR content out there yet to, well, do anything with it other than enjoy how gorgeous looking the screens are in general. One thing that I've really come to love is the True Tone display. Now, this is something you can turn off if you actually have gotten so used to mobile products and laptops' overly blue, white, bright screens. But what it does is it brings the color temperature down actually to where it's correct. With the original iPad Pro 12.9, it showed things cooler than it should have. The whites tended towards the blue. A yellow-green could look mid-green to green, blue-green, and that would be a problem. I would draw something on it, and then I would put it on my color-calibrated PC, and I would say, well, look at that. It's a lot warmer than I thought it was. So I really love True Tone because not only do I finally get accurate colors for doing artwork and for photo editing, and just it's easier on the eyes. That blue white screen is really quite tiring to look at, especially if you're already spending a day looking at computer screens, as most of us are. If you're going to spend the night staring at another overly blue-white screen, it's a little searing on the eyeballs. So suddenly the eye strain that I had went away. I say True Tone's a good thing. Now when it comes to performance, you can see the benchmarks on screen. First we'll see the iPad Pro 10.5 inch, and we've got Geekbench up there, and we have 3D Mark Ice Storm Test. And then, boom, you'll see the 12.9 inch coming up next, both first and second generation. First thing to notice, wildly fast. That's crazy. In theory, Geekbench claims that this is cross-platform baseline. So if you see an Ultrabook that scores 6,500 for the multi-core test, that should be somehow equivalent to the iOS or the Android one. I have my doubts about how possible that equivalence is, but still, looking at something that scores over 9,000 on a multi-core test is pretty darn phenomenal. The Ice Storm tests are good too. The second thing you can notice is there's a significant jump in performance from the first to the second generation 12.9 inch iPad Pro. Do you need that much horsepower? Does your iPad Pro 12.9 inch feel slow now? Probably not. Will it feel a little snappier on the new one if you're pushing it hard? Yeah, it will. You can notice the difference. Battery life is still 10 hours for each of these. As claimed, Apple is generally pretty spot on, and that's what we found. You get about 10 hours with these with the Wi-Fi models. If you get the Wi-Fi plus LTE model, they say 9 hours. We don't have the LTE models in to test that. You still get the same little chargers that don't charge particularly fast, but now you can use USB-C chargers. Of course, you'll need the right dongle adapter. Now, I used to charge the 12.9 inch iPad using the first generation MacBook USB-C charger, and that was a way faster way of charging, so that is certainly a tempting thing to do. Finally, the iPad doesn't lag behind the current generation iPhone. You get the same cameras as on the iPhone 7 with both of these new iPads. That's the same as the iPhone 7, not the 7 Plus. So you don't get the dual lens portrait mode with the bokeh, but you get the 4K video recording, you get the HDR, you get the same front camera too with 1080p video recording and 7 megapixel capability. So that's pretty darn nice. So which size do you get? Well, if you want something that feels more like a laptop replacement, obviously the 12.9 inch would be it. It's about the same size as an Ultrabook display. You'll get a bigger companion keyboard should you choose to buy one to go with it. Also, if you're an artist, more space is always better. I hate having to draw teeny little figures or landscapes on really small screens if I can, well, not do that. That said, the 10.5 inch size is a noticeable improvement over 9.7. That just felt too darn small to me for artwork, but 10.5 isn't quite so bad and so claustrophobic. For note-taking, either of these would do. I would assume most people would find the 10.5 inch the more ergonomic and easy to hold for note-taking. I think probably most people are going to go with the 10.5 inch just because it's smaller, it's easier to carry around, it's easier to hold, that sort of thing. It's just a smaller size. For those of you who don't need the laptop replacement aspect to really feel full-fledged big screen, and you're not doing art. If you're doing art, yeah, wow, big screens, yeah. What about the competition? Samsung Galaxy Tab S3 is a very sweet Android tablet that competes with the 10.5 inch model. It has a lovely high-resolution OLED display. It has a Wacom EMR pen. I really did like the pen on that display. It was a little slippery on the glass, but it had really great pressure and feel. The only problem there is, and I like Android, I love Android on phones, but it's still not a tablet-centric OS. If you think iOS needs help and we really need iOS 11 to move that along, oh my goodness. Android just really doesn't have much of a tablet focus. So when you're talking about the programs to really make use of the tablet, the art programs that are out there, all of the programs, you just get a better selection with the iPad, and the built-in apps are just such a great starting point too, that I feel like that's really what hurts the Samsung Galaxy Tab S3. When it comes to the new Surface Pro, like I said, we're going to have a smackdown with that. I still think there's a fundamental difference, though, between those of you who actually need desktop programs and those of you who don't. And I think a lot of you know who you are already, you who can't live without Photoshop or Dreamweaver or whatever that program is that you use. So there you have it, the tale of two iPad Pros available now, and they're gosh darn expensive, but they're gosh darn nice too. This is Apple doing what Apple does best, making products that have that extra little special sauce that makes you feel like, oh, if I could afford this, I would buy this. Well, I'm a little harsh on the MacBook Pros lately. These are pretty darn nice products. Not everybody needs this much tablet, but I think a lot of us wouldn't mind having it if we could afford it. I'm Lisa from Mobiletechreview. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos. Thumbs up if you like this vid. And hey, thank you to all of you who contributed to our Patreon account. I am so stoked. Thank you.